We've all heard it. By 2050, there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish, irreversible climate tipping points, mass extinction. But what if we could go back to 2050 and rewrite that script? What if oceans were thriving, climate stabilizing, wildlife rebounding? For an hour today, maybe 2050 isn't a deadline. Maybe it's the future we're actively building right now. I'm Jessica Alcide, and this is Back to 2050, spotlighting the people building the future we want to see, one bold move at a time. What if the key to saving the planet isn't in the hands of scientists or politicians, but in the hands of entrepreneurs? My guest today made that bet. At 19, Oliver Dauert chose business school over marine biology. He thought he was walking away from nature, but instead, he spent the next 15 years figuring out how to use business as the most powerful conservation tool we might have today. Now, Oliver runs Wildya, helping people become what he calls impact millionaires. Not millionaires in dollars, but in bison rewilded, coral restored, and forest protected. And he's doing it by rethinking how we go about success, anxiety, and our connection to nature. I'm Jess, and this is Back to 2050. Ollie, welcome, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to start by doing a little visualization exercise and just throwing ourselves in the future in 2050. So today it's 2050, and the work you're doing succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. What does the world look like?
Really great question. Much, much, much wilder. So I think gone are the days where you go outside and there's nothing but cars and just like noise from airplanes and so forth. Rather, we substituted that with like seeing a deer crossing, the street, going to the beach and seeing whales breaching, looking up to the sky and seeing thousands of birds migrating and sometimes even darkening a bit the sky. We might going to be in traffic jams because there's like, let's say, bison crossing the road. We will go into the oceans, and as soon as you put your feet into the water and as soon as you take, your goggles and you go on the water, no matter where you are, you will actually find life. So there will be fishes, there will be corals, there will be seaweeds. Yeah, just an abundance of life that is not just like human, that is not just pigeons, and that's not just rats, which are also like two incredible species, but more wild wilderness than that. So that's what I would see in 2050. Plus, coming to the impact millionaires, rather than championing, the Bills, the Jeffs, the Elons, we champion the Chris, the Janes, the Davids, the people that really, build this kind of water world, and we have a totally different understanding of what success and what legacy looks like.
So you were 19 when you chose business over marine biology. Take me back to that moment and what was going on through your mind, and when did you realize that this maybe wasn't the end of your nature story?
Yeah, right from the beginning, it was always the question of like, okay, how can I help nature the most? And one of the really critical reflections that I took for myself was like, I looked around me and I was just like very baffled by the fact that people like the Elons, like the Bills, like the Jeff, they get a lot of the attention, they get a lot of the resources, they get a lot of the support of society, and a lot of people thrive to be like them. And at the same time, scientists were not really listened to. And so even I that was like super into nature, I didn't know a polar bear scientist or a coral restorer and so forth. So they were not really like this kind of positive role models, super in the, let's say, in the pop culture and in the broader media. Yes, maybe in the really niche in the circles, but outside of the circles, most people didn't know these kind of people. And I was like, okay, that's very that's very devastating that there are people that commit their entire life to sometimes one species and nobody's listening to them. And how can we get them the attention? How can we get them the resources that they really need? And I just didn't, for myself, I didn't see any other way than trying to go into business school to learn what kind of tools they're currently using, what kind of techniques they're using on us to convince us, hey, if you buy this plastic shoe, you're going to throw like Michael Jordan, you're going to kick like Cristiano Ronaldo and so forth. And they managed to really do this successfully. So how can we do this, but actually do it for good and use it to rewild our planet? So yeah, that was a bit like the trist kind of realization that I was back at.
You decided to become a safari guide. What happened in those 5 weeks where you went to South Africa, and how that shifted everything for you?
Yeah, the safari guide training, I think it was COVID. COVID is like such a black hole of time. I think it happened after COVID. Sometimes you're not even sure anymore when things happened, like before COVID or after COVID. Like, I wanted to really do the safari guide training because obviously, due to my studies, I really immersed myself in all the business kind of context. But that also meant that everything that I learned about nature was totally self-taught. I was watching documentaries, reading books, listening to podcasts, reading research papers, reports, and so forth. And I just wanted to have something a bit like taught from somebody else. I didn't want to go back to university because I was already a really bad student in business school. So I was like, okay, this is, even though it's going to be like much more interesting for me, I'm not really seeing myself again like three years just consuming theory. So I was like, hey, I think this is perfect because I'm going to learn theory, but I learn it in a practical way and I learn it immersed in nature. So instead of sitting in the auditorium, I actually sit in the best auditorium in the world. I sit in the bush and learn not only from the teachers, not only from the books, but I learn from the species themselves. And so, yeah, I really wanted to have that experience.
What's one takeaway you could share with us? Like an experience, like share an experience of being in Africa with the wilderness.
I think one thing that I always like to share, because people are just like so remote nowadays, especially if you listen to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're so remote from wilderness that you have to be careful when you go on toilet at night, or you have to be careful when you going to the lunch place and so forth, because there could be literally like an elephant in your camp, a buffalo in your camp, a lion in your camp. There was an instance where I was having a phone call with my wife and I told her like, okay, sorry, I need to pause for a second because I need to tell the people in the camp that there's lions at the water hole, which was like 100 meters away from us maximum, and there was no fence. And so it was just like, okay, I better tell them. And then I just needed to get into a vehicle to continue my talk with her because I was like, okay. And this rarely happens nowadays outside of a lot of African countries. And so I was like, hey, this is actually something that people just completely lost, is that we don't even need to be so aware of our
Mm-hmm.
environment because there's almost like never kind of a
A
threat for
danger.
us, a danger
Yeah,
for
we
us. And
we removed
so
all the dangers.
yeah, exactly. And so I thought like
Mm-hmm.
this is actually something really powerful that I took away. And the other thing, just like how nature, how you, as soon as you immerse yourself for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and so forth, you start to read nature like much better. And there was an instance where somebody was just like pointing out to us, like, hey guys, did you hear? Like there were all these birds like making noises and then it's just like stopped. And then the guy was saying like there was a kind of little, yeah, I don't know, you couldn't really see the other side. And you guys was just saying, yeah, it was probably leopards. And then we just like keep on driving and we drove around the corner and guess what? There was a leopard just like jumping off. Like, and so
Oh.
just by listening, just by
Mm-hmm.
smelling, just by using all your senses,
Mm-hmm.
he could actually sense that there was something around that we as a beginners we couldn't. And so I just like always invite people to spend more time in nature, and your senses they will remember and they will sharpen, and you will see nature through different lenses the more you expose yourself to it.
My husband and I took a trip in 2022 to the Amazon.
Mm,
And for 5 days, we went deep into the Amazon with a guide and a group of 4 other people. And I really relate to what you're saying because a lot of things that they were pointing out are little bird sounds of things that we would have never seen, heard had we had been on our. And same at the end of the trip, we saw a leopard, but we would have never seen it. He was laying on the shore, but he
mm.
was so camouflaged and we're so not used to paying attention to these kind of things. But the guides, they noticed it because they're in that environment all the time and they have to be aware of like the biggest predator and the one of the biggest predators in the Amazon laying around, you know. So definitely your senses really take a little hit and you see better and you hear better and you smell better. And then you come back and you don't need to use all that.
You don't need to, plus you also want to, it's a protection mechanism that we kind of
Mm-hmm.
built, because in a lot of cities you don't want to smell everything, you don't want to see everything, you don't want to hear everything. And so like we got used to this constant noise, to this constant really extensive smell, this constant aggressive light. And people always wonder like, why do I feel not really great about myself, and like why do I not feel super healthy? And a lot of it has to do that we just like have almost like no nature exposure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that even when you are in nature, quite often you have a very depleted state of nature. You don't have, for example, if
Yeah.
you have the privilege to go to the Amazon, you will feel, okay, this is a
Mm-hmm.
different sort of
Mm-hmm.
nature than going to the Central Park, you know?
So when you quit your corporate job, what was the specific moment when you said, I'm ready to start my own thing, Wildya, or you didn't even know it was going to be Wildya at the time, but you were ready to say, I am done with my corporate life. I need to do something else. And take me through that. Also, what were you afraid of and what made you do it anyways?
I think a lot of people always think, you know, you have this like moment and then you just like leave everything behind and you just do it. And I think this was definitely not the case. So I always want to be realistic with people that this can be a journey. And just because you listen to this podcast right now doesn't mean that tomorrow you have to quit your job because I said so. It was a journey for me as well. So I think it started in COVID, where I just felt like a huge fraud because I set out to, as a kind of my 5-year-old who loved nature, I set out to protect, restore, and rewild it. And I looked at my life back in COVID and I was like, hey, Ollie, you don't listen to
Mm-hmm.
any nature podcasts, you don't watch documentaries, you don't spend much time in nature, you don't
Mm-hmm.
read, you don't do anything, you don't protect habitat and so forth. What the heck are you then supposed to do as a nature lover? Because it's clearly not what
Mm-hmm.
who you are in real life. And I was like, okay, this needs to change. Then I invested like much more into like things like the safari guide training, theoretical trainings, starting to read much more. And I just like more and more this kind of thought kind of came to me like, okay, let's try to first internally in my company, try to move nature up the priority list. And as soon as I started to realize that this is going to be much, much harder and that I felt a bit like, okay, this is like not impossible, but I just felt like very disheartened by how little of a priority it was, even though I was working in tourism. So tourism is literally dependent 100% on nature. Like, what do people go for? You just said it. You were in the Amazon. Of course, maybe you can also go for the cultures, and there will still be things if all nature would be gone. But most people go there to see, like what this wilderness looks like and so forth. And so, even in tourism, and even for a company that was quite progressive, they really didn't put a huge priority on nature.
What was
So
the biggest blocker, you think?
I think with them, it was like, and I think this is a fair point. When you look at sustainability, a lot of companies, they have different priorities within sustainability. For some, it's climate, for some, it's social, for some, it's like nature. It's almost like never nature, which was one of the critiques. For them, it was really huge, this kind of social aspects of like reducing over-tourism and at the same time as well helping like local people. And I think this is a really great cause, but it was not really my cause. And I thought like, okay, at the same time, even like local people, they benefit much more from a thriving nature. And if in the end every tourist exploits the nature that he comes to see, then sooner or later there won't be nature. There won't be
Mm-hmm.
tourists coming at all, and then the local people are also having an issue. So I'm always
Mm-hmm.
like, nature is kind of the silver bullet for climate and for social. So I'm like, okay, let's prioritize nature, because if we prioritize nature, we have all these positive ripple effects on the other two. But they didn't really see that. So I think this was one part. And the other part is, in the end, it's like business is still business, like, so you have like your revenue goals and you have the profits that you need to make and so forth. And you have just
Well,
like other priorities that are in the end are more important to make the decision, or like
mm-hmm.
yeah. But they are B Corp and they're doing really a lot of like really good things. But I was just like, if even for them I don't manage to really move it up the priority list and really make it the top of the priority list, then I need to venture out and I need to do something outside the industry.
Well, most people measure success in dollars and
Mm,
salary and promotion and savings.
mm,
You went on to create your own company, and
mm.
you talk about impact millionaires. What does an impact millionaire actually look like in practice? How do you now help people make that shift?
Yeah, so I think like one of the people that really inspired this thought of thinking is like Chris Tompkins. So she's a former CEO of Patagonia, and she and her late husband Doug, they put their own money into rewilding Chile and Argentina. And what I so loved about this idea is like she could have stayed in Patagonia and lead the company. He could have like launched another fashion company. He could have launched something else. And with the both the kind of the money that they made in their endeavors, they decided to put all of that money into buying degraded land and protect it, restore it, rewild it, and then giving it actually back to people. So actually putting all these resources in to then just say, like, here we give it back to the local
Hmm.
people because they're the stewards of this land and they should have this kind of pride to
Protect it.
to yeah, to protect it and give it to bring it to the next stage. And for me,
Make
that
sure
was
to.
just like, that was exactly this kind of decision that you can make. You can make the decision to add more zeros on your bank account, invest it, create a new venture, whatever, or you invest it into trying to create an impact. And they chose that one. So this kind of idea sparked a bit from them doing it actually in real life. Did they succeed by themselves? No, but neither do millionaires and billionaires. They don't get to become billionaires just because they worked really hard alone. Nobody becomes a billionaire alone. And same goes for the impact millionaire. Nobody is there without a team. Nobody is there without the
Hmm.
support of plenty of people. But we need this kind of positive role models that guide us the way. And so from then we said it, okay, now Chris and Douglas are having it maybe a bit not an ordinary journey. So how can we create, first of all, how can we create more impact millionaires that don't necessarily always need to protect 46 million acres, because then it can be a bit disheartening. You're like, same as if you would start as an entrepreneur and you immediately try to compare yourself with Bill Gates. So first of all, we said like, okay, million impact can also be Ali, for example. She's 11 years old and she picked up like a million pieces of plastic pieces from nature. That's an impact millionaire. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different measurement. So first of all, we said like, okay, let's try to create something to make it a bit like clear for people that even the impact million and impact billion, you can look at it through different lenses. So that it doesn't seem as overwhelming to start with. So it can be million pieces, then it can become million kilograms, then it can be million tons of plastic removed, for example. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing of like, we tried to decode of like, how can we create more of those? And one of the things that we found is that in the business world, you have tons of resources of like how to get rich, or how to start your own startup. But all these kind of help resources, they don't really exist for the nature world. So how you can actually try to rewild 1 million bison, how you can restore 1 million corals, all of that, that is not really in the public. That's not really accessible. So how can people become these kind of impact millionaires if they don't have the help resources and if they don't have the support system to actually go there? And so we decided to build exactly that, the support system that can help people to start, that can help people to get to their first impact million, and then go beyond if they want to and scale really the nature impact.
Talking about that, you called Wildya the Y Combinator for nature.
Mm.
For people who don't know what a Y Combinator is, walk me through what it actually means and what does it look like when someone joins Wildya with just an idea?
Yes, so the Y Combinator is probably the most famous birth ground of like ideas like Airbnb, Stripe, Reddit. They've done a really great, they really created like an incredible ecosystem to grow these new ideas into very scalable products that change our world. The only challenge with them is that they are still very focused on tech and they're really focused on profit. And so fantastic job, but still the wrong incentives, I would say. And so we were thinking, okay, how can we take some components that we really appreciate about them and they clearly help? They're doing definitely something great. You
Mm-hmm.
don't always have to agree with people what they're doing, but you can still appreciate and can say
Recognize.
like recognize, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like you're doing something great. Let's change the incentives. And so we say like, okay, they're doing a great job on, for example, doing community building. They do a lot of free resources that are really helpful. They do initial investment of like, I think it was like 250 or maybe it's even 500,000 now. So they do a lot of things that kind of remove the obstacles for people to start their own tech venture. And we were saying like, okay, let's try to step by step build the same support system, but for nature people that really want to scale nature impact. And so what are their obstacles? Obstacles are often like, okay, I don't know how to start. The obstacles are often like, okay, I really know a lot of nature stuff, but I don't know a lot about like, how do I get attention? How can I build great products? How do I create a financial revenue system so I can actually scale my impact? And then another thing is like funding, like how can we fund this? Can we get an investor for this? Can we find a grant? Can we have all of these kind of things? And we try to step by step eliminate all of this. So if people join Wildya, there's basically three ways of how we can help them. There is one-to-one support. So if people want to work just with Michel, which is my co-founder, or me, then we can do that. Our biggest focus, however, is on the community that we're building. In the community, we bring in every Tuesday, we bring in a person that either is already an impact millionaire or that helps people to become impact millionaires as well. We give like funding opportunities, we give blueprints, best practices, everything basically that they need in order to get there. And then we also launched a program that is called Eco-preneur Beginner Bootcamp, where we in 6 weeks help people that basically want to start their own nature NGO or nature venture and want to really progress a lot in 6 weeks. And we help them to get everything started so that they can hopefully get their first paying supporters within that time frame. Basically everything I wish I would have had.
Would have
So
had.
I wouldn't have had like this kind of 2.5 years of like painful journey. So yeah.
Well, actually, about that, what surprised you the most in the first year of building Wildya? What was working that you didn't expect? And what was harder than you thought?
So definitely things that I didn't expect was like this entire LinkedIn journey. Like I started to write on LinkedIn I think it was right after I quit my job because I was just like, okay, nature needs to be on that platform because that's where businesses are. And businesses need to appreciate nature. So let's write nature related content on that business platform. And that didn't take off immediately. So it was like 6 months of me writing for every day for nobody. Like there was like no engagement, nothing. And
You made a
then
single post every single day.
single post everything. I think at least I would say at least 5 every week. I think most of the time even 7 for 6 months, and
Wow.
nothing happened. So nothing happened, and then it started. Then there's the first post that went like not viral, but like went a bit better, and then it's the second post and the third post,
Hmm.
and then a couple of like weeks and months later, like it's working really well, and people actually really appreciate what I have to say. So that was definitely zero expected. I started it because I really wanted some clarity in my head. I wanted to get it out of my head. I wanted to get people in the business world excited about nature, and thought like, hey, maybe it's also a good marketing channel because I don't have any marketing budget. Was it? So that was definitely working better than expected. What was much harder was like, I think, building a product in that nature space, because if we would appreciate nature and if we would value nature, we wouldn't be in this kind of nature crisis. So by default, you're working for something that is very underappreciated. That also means
Hmm.
you're not going to get that much attention. That also means you're not going to get that many resources. That also means you don't have that many help support system for what you're building. And at the beginning, we had a totally different idea. We wanted to build an app that helps people with their mental well-being and boosts nature. And as
Hmm.
soon as you try to do something that is a bit more out of the box, you obviously need to be even better in all the different aspects of doing the business side. And we were just not delivering on that. So I thought like building a product or building a service would be much easier, especially because I studied business. So I thought like, okay, I did a lot of homework, and I should be able to pull something off. Turns out it's not as easy.
Well, talking about that eco-anxiety that you just mentioned, you talk a lot about transforming eco-anxiety into action, but there must be days, even when you feel the weight of what's at stake. And I'm wondering, how do you stay in action mode when the news is so devastating sometimes? And as a new
Yeah.
father.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest reflections of my entire ecopreneurship journey, and also reflecting on my own life, was that for a long time I always thought like, you see in the public everybody is always like, follow your passion, and let your passion guide you. And I think there's an overemphasis on like how much passion can be a driver for something, and how much also negative, like we so-called negative labeled emotions can be. So all these kind of emotions, we feel them. And so I was like, okay, I think I just got better in learning how to use them and use them for fuel as well. So by now I
Hmm.
would say there's still a huge component that is passion for the wilder world. So I think it's maybe 40%, but I think 60% is really this anger, frustration, not being wanting to be responsible that on our watch we let that
Hmm.
happen, the six math extension. So I think this was really one of the things that got me really being more okay to feel whatever I feel, and then just trying to use it as fuel. So I often see it like, okay, what do I feel right now? And then trying to get as fast as I possibly can out of this emotional state, and using it more for fuel of like doing even more and doing it even better and being more focused and being more concentrated, and
Hmm.
making sure that whatever I do has the biggest possible impact. A really good example of this was like just right before our recording of this podcast, I saw some news that elephant seals, like the biggest population of elephant seals, there was like a bird flu, and apparently it's reduced the female population of that biggest seal elephant population by 50%. And so when I was 5, I asked my mom to dress me up as an elephant seal. And so when you read this kind of news, whereas like, as a
Breaks your
5-year-old, I
heart.
wanted to be an elephant seal, and now I'm reading this news and I'm like, bird flu, who's talking about bird flu? Like nobody
Hmm.
ever talks about bird flu. You can see an
Yeah.
article here and there, but like it's not big news. It's bigger news that Taylor Swift got engaged.
Hmm.
So on these days it's like it really hits you like a really punch in the gut. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a minute, sometimes it takes an hour, sometimes it takes 2-3 days. And then I'm like, okay, let's get cracking.
Let's get going. What gives you the genuine hope that we can pull this off? And I'm not talking about optimism for optimism's sake, but like real evidence that makes you think, yes, we can actually rewild this planet. I know you mentioned Chris Tompkins, but maybe on your closer radar, do you see on every day that people are getting more and more connected, more and more involved, that we're progressing in the right sense?
Yes and no. I think sometimes it feels like, we're making some really great progress, and then sometimes you feel like, oh my God, we just took like 2-3 steps back. So some people, they can just make a signature, and they can demolish entire national parks today. And then you're like, at the same
Yeah.
time, you see like urban rewilding, for example. There's
Hmm.
now this kind of push for more pocket forest inside cities, or people. I just bought a book in the US about guerrilla gardening, so where you take native seeds and you try to spread them everywhere in the
Oh,
city so
yeah.
that you have actually native plants growing. So you have like all these incredible initiatives, incredible innovative minds. The good thing is, why I think we can turn this around, is we know the problems, we know what causes
Mm-hmm.
this, we know the root causes, we know the underlying values and so forth that we need to tackle. We know the solutions, we have the
Mm-hmm.
solutions. So there's like, for every problem that we have, there are really big solutions. If we want to tackle them, we could do it tomorrow. So that's really great. We have the resources, but we have, like, in theory, we have all the resources that we need. There's nothing like, we need this really specific material that doesn't exist on Earth, and we need to fly to Mars to get it. It's not like that. No, we have all we have everything that we need here. We have all the money, and I think we are, just from the tech, from the intelligence, potentially we have all the knowledge. Like we could tap into this, and we have proven, and that's the last one. We have proven that we can pull it off. So, for example, with whales, there was a really high chance
Yeah.
that you and me wouldn't see whales in our
Mm-hmm.
lifetime anymore.
Yeah, they were on the brink of
Actually,
extinction.
yeah, exactly. They were really on the brink
Mm-hmm.
of extinction. And so there was just this guy that then started to share the sounds of humpback whales, and he made like an album about this. And that totally reconnected people with whales and saw them
Mm-hmm.
as something more than meat and blubber
Mm-hmm.
and oil. And now it became like, wow, incredible. They are sensitive beings, and they should exist in this world together with us, and that helped them to protect whales. And now at least humpback whales are doing much better, and they're going even towards a bit more historical numbers. So we have proof of this, that also when we get our stuff together and if we collaborate, we can really get to move things fast. So yes, there's COP30 30 times, and we still not phased out fossil fuels, but then there's other decisions like the humpback whales. There's other decisions like
Mm-hmm.
the ozone layer. There was a time where we were discussing about like the ozone layer. There was this chemicals that caused it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they prohibit the chemicals, and ozone layer is at least doing a bit better. So
Mm-hmm.
if we say, okay, this is a priority for us, this is important for us, we actually can get moving things quickly. So that's a bit like what I see.
You've been working a lot with eco-preneurs.
Mhm.
What pattern do you see, and where do they get stuck, and how do you help them get unstuck?
Yeah, so one of the things is always like, obviously, money. We're living in a
Mm-hmm.
capitalistic world, so you need money. And a lot of people would think like, I have an idea, and then I need to get to an investor, or then I need to get to a grant. The problem is, if you have an idea, they're not going to give you a grant, or they do rarely give you like investor gives you money, because you have nothing proven that this could work. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people always like waste a lot of time and get disheartened by all the no's that they get from the money givers, instead of building actually something. So build something, try to create a bit of traction so that people are interested about this, and then you will also have a much easier time to get, hopefully, external financing. So I think that's what's something that a lot of people get wrong. And the second thing, which I got wrong for a long, long time, and which I think now I try to advise everybody to not do the same mistake, is like, in our nature bubble, we use a lot of arguments that are altruistic. So it's a lot about like, doing the right thing. It's a lot about like,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, the non-human world should exist too. But now if you're trying to convince somebody that is outside of the nature bubble, they're just not going to buy that. If people would buy that, and if they would make decisions based on that, then we wouldn't be in this problem. But people
Mm-hmm.
don't appreciate nature. They don't value nature. So you need to find arguments that resonate with them. Example, I think 76% of all cancer-related drugs are thanks to nature. We either need, like, the inspiration came from nature, or otherwise we need components from nature. Now, just imagine we all lost people that we love to cancer. Just imagine either we couldn't save as many people, or their entire journey would be so much more painful. Nobody wants that. And now you
Mm-hmm.
have an entry to talk about nature, and it's totally different. And that's something that people care about. Or some people care really about the fitness. So
Mm-hmm.
you can say like, hey, if you eat so much meat, it's really not great for your fitness, because first of all, you're not going to get as much protein, you get a lot of fat, blah 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 blah. So
You have
trying
to
to
make
use
it
the
about
argument.
them.
Exactly. You have
Yeah.
to find things that, like, okay, what does the person in front of me care about? And you will always find an angle to talk about nature, but don't start with like, polar bears are cute and
Mm-hmm.
that's why they should be saved.
One last question for you, Ali, before I let you go. For someone who's listening and feeling that pull toward nature impact, but they're stuck in a 9 to 5, paralyzed by I don't know where to start. What's the first small step they can take this week?
I think this smallest step they can take is just like actually go outside. In the end, let's not make it too hard. Like just spend a bit more time in nature. And that can be 5 minutes. If right now you spend 0 minutes in nature, 5 minutes is already improvement. Just go out, put your shoes on, maybe put the phone on airplane mode and just like see a bit like what's around you, what Jess was saying about the Amazon. Use your senses, look, smell, hear, and just see that nature's still around you. And that already gives you a bit of a kind of a motivational boost, because if something happens in Amazon, if something happens to the polar bear and you're not living in you don't living in these kind of environments, then you're not going to care that much. But maybe you're going to care about like, hey, there's still kind of this local forest holding on. And that's really something maybe that you can get involved in. So
Yeah.
I think spending a bit more time outdoors always helps. And then the second one is always like, sometimes ambition gets the best out of us. And so we think like, we really think in extremes. We think like, I need to quit my job and immediately start this nature venture and leave everything behind. And I'm actually a big fan of like, like grow into this. And so we
Step
all
by
can,
step, like,
exactly, we can all find an hour of our time during a day, which we could use to help nature. We all could. There's no excuse about this. Yes, maybe sometimes you need to sleep a bit less. Sometimes maybe you need to reshuffle things with the kids. Sometimes maybe you need to talk with your work in order to maybe get a bit of a salary decrease to have this 1 hour. There's so many ways how you can get that hour. Everybody, or maybe turn off Netflix, but
yeah.
everybody can get this 1 hour. And so 1 hour a day is 7 hours in a week. That's one work day. So in one work day, you can get things started. So definitely. You also don't need to start everything from scratch. So you can actually look around if there's already people that are doing really fantastic things in your local neighborhood and just join them. Like this, you don't have to do all of this kind of brain stuff of like, okay, what can I do and who can I help? Just join, just lend your help, your skills, your talents to somebody that is already doing fantastic work. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you for your time. And thank you for all your valuable advice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all the great questions and for the privilege to be on your show. Thank you.
You've just listened to an episode of Back to 2050. If you liked it, please share it along. If it sparked something in you, I'd love to hear about it. And if you know change makers building solutions who should be on this show, send them my way. More episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm Jessica Alcide, and this was Back to 2050. Thank you for listening.